Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, March 7th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal, the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Kimberly St, Julian Varnon, Ph.D. student in history at the University of Pennsylvania on the Ukrainian history and the dynamic with Afro-Ukrainians in the country. Meanwhile, Russia claims to offer civilian evacuation routes to Russia and Belarus for the fourth time now, but continues to shell civilian areas. In Russia itself, over 4,500 were arrested yesterday for protesting against the Ukrainian invasion. U.S. and Europeans contemplate sending warplanes to Ukraine and banning Russian oil imports. Big deal. That's a big deal. WNBA star Brittany Griner detained in Russia for a vape pen. UK and France close to brokering a new Iranian nuke deal. The D.C. Court of Appeals quashes the Biden administration's use of Title 42, for families at least. World COVID death toll tops 6 million as the pandemic enters its third year, at least specifically in this country. New York City lifts school mask mandates. The Biden Education Department forcing a bankrupt cancer patient to show hardship. The $100,000 they owe. Meanwhile, the administration floats the idea of extending the student debt moratorium. Supreme Court reinstates the death penalty for the Boston Marathon bomber. And a new report out of MIT's journal, law enforcement in Minnesota have been running a long-time spying program against BLM. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting notice that the YouTube chat is disabled. People are freaking out about that.
What?
It's on now? Okay. Somebody got
outdated.
Freaked out by that, apparently.
I see it. Bradley's showing the evidence.
I'll tell you who's just about to get banned from the IMs, though, is MIDI Doctors.
Really?
Just sent like 12 YouTube chat disabled buttons to me.
All right. Well, you know, the world keeps spinning on its axis, MIDI Doctors. Hello,
Joining
Sam.
me today,
Hi.
Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I am well. Let me just say happy birthday to my son, Saul.
Happy birthday, Saul.
Saul,
9 years old.
Is 9 years old today. Which is nuts. When my son was born, that is what gave birth to Mike and Matt Mondays on this program.
Oh, yeah?
Which was my attempt to get a parental leave for what turned out to be an extended period of time. And much to the benefit of everyone, though, I think. So that worked out well. We took Saul. Saul had a birthday party yesterday.
Rock climbing, you said?
Yes. And
again, that's a perfect activity for like kids that age. I remember loving those birthday parties.
Yeah, I was surprised, a little hectic, a little exhausting. And of course, it was my sister's birthday on Saturday.
Julie?
Yes.
Happy birthday, Julie.
So happy birthday to my sister as well. So I'm exhausted.
We're just throwing birthdays out there. Happy birthday to one of my closest friends, Christy. We did karaoke on Saturday. I won the shofar.
Thanks for leaning on this so much.
Hey, you got two.
I mean, I don't think people have ever heard. I mean, I don't think. People. Don't know who Christy is. I mean, they've heard of my sister and Saul before. So, sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, this is me like showing my dominance, right? Like
things are getting super weird around here on a Monday. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
You're just you're.
I mean,
don't know what's going on.
You had an that lasted for 10 seconds.
Yeah, no,
so.
I had a brain freeze. All right, folks. So let's get into this. We pre-recorded the interview the other day, but really interesting stuff in terms of like a good history of Ukraine, but also addressing questions of the Azov battalion. Is that or regiment?
Battalion, right?
I mean, it depends on who you talk to, and the presence of neo-Nazis in the context of the government. I mean, all the questions that you had or have about Ukraine, I think, answered in this interview, and more, frankly. She is a historian who is also studying the dynamic of race in the context of Ukraine. Very interesting interview. But before we go there, the dynamic has not changed dramatically over the course of the weekend with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They offered, I think it was essentially over the past 24 hours, a safe passage corridor to Belarus or Russia for civilians, as opposed to, say, out the West. And the Ukrainians more or less rejected it.
Understandably.
Well, the other dynamic is that the Russians have claimed to offer at least one or two other civilian sort of passageways that they then proceeded to bomb. And it is becoming clear that phase two, if phase one doesn't work for the Russians, is to punish the civilian population as much as they can. And with that said, there is still a growing choir of people in this country, perhaps in Europe, although I would imagine less so, who are determined to get the United States and Europe into the game more. And here is Joe Scarborough, former Republican congressman, came in during the Newt Gingrich revolution, pushing that very same thing.
Spoke yesterday to several senior administration officials in previous administrations, and I was struck by how many of them understood that the United States should not introduce troops to NATO, should not have a no-fly zone because of what that would provoke. But I did hear quiet criticism, something that they said they would not say publicly, but quiet criticism that the United States should not recoil every time Vladimir Putin or his foreign minister wave the bloody flag of basically nuclear brinkmanship. When we When we are silent, when we back down, when we capitulate to that, they suggest that we actually make it more likely that Putin sees us as weak and that he's more likely to use nuclear weapons. And their suggestion is to call his bluff and speak about the consequences of nuclear weapons and the consequences for the Russian people, and to not just again be seen to be capitulating. I'm curious what you think.
What does that even mean, though? What is it that how are you capitulating? If you're not going to, and he said that, and I would imagine he's talking about the George Bush administration. Right. I don't know how many Donald Trump administration folks would be talking to him, although I'm sure the same ones who were there during the Bush administration, of which there certainly were some. There were Republicans, after all. If they're saying at that point, well, yeah, you don't want to do the no-fly zone, and you don't want to do you don't want to have military personnel there. What is the capitulation that is going on here?
It's just we look weak. We look weak.
But how do you go, well, if you bomb us, we'll bomb you? I mean, is that not really firmly, does Putin really think, or is in any danger of thinking, maybe if I bomb them, they won't bomb me?
No. I mean, it's just, I mean, this has been relentless. I mentioned this before the show. CNN was on in like the laundry when I was doing my laundry in the room there. And it's just, what are we going to do next? How are we going to act next? How are we going to respond? How is the United States going to show its strength in this area? And like, you have people like Marco Rubio, Boris Johnson saying, no, we don't want a no-fly zone, because there's an understanding of what that means. After the show ended, a poll came out, which was like poorly worded, but it still, I think, is instructive, because these things are not explained to the American public, definitely not on Fox News. I mean, on cable news. A no-fly zone is not a force field. 74% of Americans, according to this poll, said that they would support a no-fly zone. No. A no-fly zone would mean shooting down Russian planes. That would mean war. And that's not something that anybody should seriously engage in. And conservatives in this country are also reticent about that for the most part. But when you turn on cable news, it's like should we or should we not? Let's have a reasonable debate about an active war against a nuclear power.
What's also missing from this conversation is the extraordinary measures that we are prepared to take as a country to help with Ukrainian refugees. I know that we're doing temporary protected status in this country, but we should be talking about airlifts and funding. And this is what we should be. I mean, I think you can listen for hours upon hours and hear no one even hint at something like that. It's pretty stunning in that regard. But war is much more entertaining. Yes. I mean, this is, I don't know if I could say something less profound than if it bleeds, it leads. And this has been something since, back when we would read the newspaper and get ink on our hands. And even when we would get it from the Pony Express. Maybe, I don't know about that.
Right. Well, when you would.
But yeah, exactly. But that's the situation that we're facing. And of course, there is, they're so desperate to look at a way to pressure the Biden administration, I think, in this instance, who I think have been doing a fairly good job, frankly, of avoiding that type of pressure. But they're so desperate. Now it's that Putin, when he says he's going to, if we engage in a no-fly zone, he's going to, put his nuclear weapons on high alert, that we didn't come back and go, well, if you bomb us, we'll bomb you, seems honestly like they need some time to fill.
And last thing too, I saw that Jon Stewart said something like, this is what cable news is made to do. And when they really step up when there's a wartime effort.
I'll bet.
Yeah. what are they stepping up to do, honestly? I mean, like, it was a really, I think, stupid statement by him. They are stepping up because they want more action for their coverage, and when like foreign correspondents are in these things, there is always a push for action for the sake of action, and being reactive in a situation like this could not be. It's the worst tendency of all. It's a very deadly tendency, and cable news and media like this, they're invested in the perception of American might above all, and power and hegemony, and they're completely, I think, oblivious to or don't care about the consequences of it. And the consequence would be more death. So that's what we cannot engage in. Fascinating
notion to think about 1/4 of this type of coverage, just 1/4 of it, for what's going on in Afghanistan as people are starving, or in Yemen, where we're bombing. Just as like a low-hanging fruit thought experiment. What would happen if we had 1/4 of the reporting that's going on in Yemen or in Afghanistan? But that's all it is. Thought experiment won't happen. And we're just left to sort of, hopefully, I don't know, maybe the Saudis get tired, and maybe somehow in Afghanistan food starts to grow. So a couple of sponsors of today's program before we get to Kimberly St, Julian Varnon. This come up actually. I was getting like a wellness check from a doctor, just like a, over the phone type of thing. What are you doing for hydration? Yeah, not drinking that much water. And then I was like, wait a second, that's not true. I drink like, I don't know that's like 2 quarts, like half gallon. I drink a gallon of water a day with liquid IV.
Nice.
During the show. I mean, you see that.
So that's a plus. Yes.
Yes. I was like, it took me a second to realize that. And I guess maybe it is because it's also incredibly enjoyable.
It's tasty. You don't even know it's
watermelon, lemon lime, strawberry, pina colada. It's my weakness. People know
acai.
I don't even know how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
Liquid IV contains 5 essential vitamins: B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C. Liquid IV, you get 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. And Liquid IV is made with premium ingredients. It is non-GMO. It is free from gluten and dairy and soy. They use the science of cellular transport technology, and it's what makes Liquid IV so effective. It's designed to enhance rapid absorption of water and other key ingredients into the bloodstream. Liquid IV is on a mission to change the world. The company has donated over 19 million servings globally. For me, it's a great way to stay hydrated, particularly if I've overindulged the night before. But frankly, I realize like it's become just almost a daily thing, at least in terms of like when I'm doing the show. And then once or twice over the weekend, I remember to do the same thing. And it is, it's healthy to keep yourself hydrated. I use it when I travel, but I realize it also powers me through these shows. And the matcha one also, speaking of a little bit of an energy boost. But for me, these days, I get stuck on the tangerine. I'm off. I haven't had watermelon or pina colada. It's been tangerine and matcha. That's it. But I'll go back. I go back and forth. You can grab Liquid IV in bulk nationwide at Costco, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep at checkout. That's 25% off anything when you use the promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today. liquidiv.com, promo code MajorityRep. Also, when we talk about sort of a daily ritual, if you will, no pun intended, you want to know what you're putting in your body, and you want to know why. Well, Ritual's clean, vegan-friendly multivitamin is formulated with high-quality nutrients in a bioavailable forms that your body can actually use. No sugars, no GMOs, no major allergens, no synthetic fillers, no artificial colorants. Plus the fresh taste and delayed release capsule makes taking your vitamins easy. Ritual delivers high-quality nutrients, including vitamin D3, in just 2 daily pills. I hope I'm not giving anything away, but I am on the over 50 multivitamin, and it's good. My vitamin D levels. For years I would get not criticized by my doctor, but he would say, like, you need to raise your vitamin D levels.
Tough love.
Yeah. What's wrong with you, Sam? Your vitamin D is so low.
You look like crap.
You look like crap. He's actually said that to me at different times. But the vitamin D level, it's up, and very good for your health and for preventing. It's associated, at the very least, with protection from certain cancers. And here's the bottom line: multivitamins should contain key nutrients in forms that your body can actually use. So Ritual is now available for women, men, and teens. Ritual multivitamins are scientifically developed to help support different life stages. And here's the best part, because I have many times in my life tried to start taking vitamins or a multivitamin or whatever. And when I finish the first bottle, I forget to get the next bottle. And then a couple of days later, I'm done.
Auto refill, baby.
Your multivitamins are delivered to your door every month with free shipping. That you can start, you can snooze it, you can cancel your subscription at any time. If you don't love Ritual within your first month, they refund your first order. But this is aside from getting high quality vitamins, which is important, having them delivered to you on a regular basis so that you maintain your good habits, that for me anyways, has been the key. Get key nutrients without all the BS. Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/majority to start your Ritual today. And lastly, I don't know if you know this, but only 9% of plastic actually gets recycled.
What?
Yep. Doesn't matter how much we put in our recycling bin. At Grove Collaborative, they believe it's time to ditch single-use plastics for good. So by 2025, Grove will be 100% plastic-free. What is Grove? It is a one-stop shop, if you will, for laundry care to hand soaps and more. They carry hundreds of products aimed at replacing single-use plastics across every room of your home and your head-to-toe personal care routine. Grove Co.'s concentrated cleaners and refillable glass bottles are friendlier to the planet, twice as effective as the leading natural brands. So I am now basically plastic-free when it comes to my hand pumps. I have, or I should say, the single-use hand pumps. I've got containers of Grove soap, and I refill. I'm a total refill guy now. Over 2 million households already rely on Grove Co. for safe formulas and refillable packaging that never compromises on performance. These guys got me through the lockdown during the pandemic. They get me my scent-free dishwashing soap and hand soap. I got to say the hand soap pumps, and they also have their own orange concentrate cleaner that I use in a spray bottle, and I am exclusively that now too. So I don't buy all the different plastic bottles of this stuff. I just refill it, and it's I like the stuff on top of the fact that I feel like I'm not contributing to all the plastic. Go to grove.com/majority today. Get a free gift worth up to $50 with your first order. Plus, shipping is fast and free. Get started right now at grove.com/majority. Grove.com/majority. Also, a couple of announcements. On Thursday of this week, I'm going to be at the Bell House for the Bituation Room.
Whoa.
Francesca Fiorentini is coming into town and doing her show live. You can get tickets at bituationroom.com. It's going to be fun. I think it's like at 7 or 8 p.m. at the Bell House. And then after you see me there, you can see all of us in a couple of weeks
At the
Bell House.
Yeah.
You can't go anymore. Well, you can.
If you have your
sold
ticket.
out. If you have your ticket, it's sold out. But you can live stream it. And if you sign up for the AM Quickie today at amquickie.com, you get a massive discount on the live streaming. Over 50%. I know. People are like, this is why you're bad at business. Well, I don't care. Over 50%. Check it out. amquickie.com. Also, there's a link in the amquickie.com to an interview with Jack Crosby, one of our writers of, he hasn't been doing it for the past couple of weeks or so. Corey's been doing it because Jack has been in Ukraine, still there, trying to get out. Did an interview with The Discourse, the blog that he's cooperative he's part of. But you can find that link there. So coupon code, link to Jack's interview. Sign up for the AM Quickie. You will not be disappointed. We have over 6,000 readers a day now on the AM Quickie.
Whoa.
I mean, on any given day. So check it out. People are really enjoying that newsletter. And it is still fully free 5 days a week. It may change, but check it out now while you can. All right. We're going to just take a quick break. No? All right. We're just going to roll right into it. There's an interview that Emma and I did on Friday with Kimberly St. and Julian Varnon, Ph.D. student in history at the University of Pennsylvania. Here is that interview. We'll be back at the end. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now is Kimberly St. Julian Varnon. She is a Ph.D. student in history at the University of Pennsylvania. Kimberly, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland. And I was just saying before we started, I think a lot of people in media found you via Twitter, and you have a discipline that is, I think, fairly unique in terms of your perspective on Ukraine. And so tell us that. I want to get into the Ukrainian history. I know you lived in Ukraine for some time as part of your studies. But just give us a sense of what your disciplinary study is, and then we'll talk a little bit about Ukrainian history and circle back around to some of those issues.
Sure. So I am from rural Southeast Texas, and you can totally hear it in my voice. So I didn't know about Russia or Ukraine until I was an undergrad at Swarthmore, and I started studying Soviet history. And kind of since then, I've been obsessed with the region. And so what I do now, like my dissertation research, is it uses the experiences of Africans and African Americans in the Soviet Union, but also in Eastern Germany, to kind of explore how does race work? What is the form of race in countries that are, in terms of their socialist ideology, are officially race neutral and don't see race as a means of categorizing people? So that's where the heart of my research is. And within the Soviet Union, I focus on Russia and Ukraine. So like overnight, my research has suddenly become very important to these like national discourses we're seeing.
Okay, and we'll circle back around that, but give us a little bit of history of Ukrainian history, and let's go back to I guess pre-1914 even, just so we get a sense, because the claim by Putin is there's really, I guess there's two sets of claims. One which I think has some validity, not necessarily in terms of his response. In fact, specifically not necessarily in terms of his response, which is around the question of NATO. We'll get to that in a moment. But this notion of Ukraine being not really existing, that it's actually just greater Russia. Just walk us back Ukrainian history, and or start in the late 1800s and maybe walk us forward, maybe.
Awesome. And yes, I have to unteach a lot of what Vladimir Putin has put into the air. So the basic way to understand Ukrainian history before the rise of the Soviet Union is to understand that Ukraine as a united country is very recent in Ukrainian history. So before 1917, before 1914, at the start of World War I, Ukraine is split between the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the west and the Russian Empire in the east. And before this, Ukraine was for a long time, Western Ukraine was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And it's a joke for us Eastern European historians about how, like, if you look at a map between 1700 and 1900, you see Poland disappear because Poland is split up 3 times by Russia, Prussia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So Western Ukraine does not have a significant history with the Russian Empire, but Eastern Ukraine does. So Eastern Ukraine, thinking about Kiev, further east of Kiev, has been an important part of the Russian Empire. It was the grain basket of the Russian Empire, it was the grain basket of the Soviet Union, but also a key part of Imperial Russian history as the Valuev Circular, which was passed in the mid to late 19th century or 1800s. And this prevented the publication of anything in Ukrainian. It didn't allow for the teaching of Ukrainian in schools. And so it was really reinforcing this Russian nationalist idea, which was Orthodox Christianity and Russian language and culture.
Can I ask you? I mean, so you said Kiev west, but do you mean Kiev east in terms of
Kiev east? Yes.
Okay.
East,
okay.
Kiev
I got a little bit
east.
confused. And
Sorry.
just and we should say, but when we say the breadbasket of Russia, it is because there's a tremendous amount of very, very fertile land there that is great for farming. What about Odessa at that point? Where is Odessa? Because this is there's 2 things, right? That I guess, you know, when you're talking about the 1800s and prior to that, that are super important in terms of resources, the idea of good farmland, and then the idea of like a port. And so where was Odessa in that?
Odessa is the jewel of the Russian Empire. It was a key part of Catherine the Great's expansion of the Russian Empire in the mid to late 1700s. It is the most important port city in Ukraine, and it was a huge port for the Russian Empire. And so control of the Black Sea was also a key part of why when you see Russian imperial expansion to the south, why Odessa and Mariupol and Kherson, those areas in the south along the Black Sea are so important. So Odessa is not only economically important, it's very culturally important to Russian imperial history, particularly Russian Jewish history. So you have some later writers and Soviet writers like Isaac Babel, who comes from Odessa. His Odessa tales are famous because he had this, like, the gangster Bin Ukrik. But Odessa is also one of the birthplaces of I forgot the word. So Orthodox Judaism it blooms in Odessa. So Odessa is very culturally important to Jewish history in Ukraine and in Russia. So one of the things so when you think about Eastern Ukraine, so Kiev East, those are the connections you see to the Russian Empire. But a key part of this, besides the official repression of Ukrainian language, is that Odessa, Kiev, Eastern Ukraine has always been multicultural and multilingual. And so when you have Putin saying Russian speakers in Ukraine are Russians, that's just him blatantly, painting over the fact that this has always been a multilingual country. When I was living in Ukraine in 2013, I only spoke Russian at that point, and I got along just fine. I was in Kiev, I was in Odessa, I spoke Russian. People spoke Russian to me. Sometimes they speak Russian and Ukrainian. It's like famous Ukrainians can do this in the East, but in the same sentence, they'll speak Ukrainian and Russian. They're not the same language. I'm learning Ukrainian now. They're not the same language. So that's kind of the history of the imperial pre-1914 part of Eastern Ukraine. Western Ukraine is part of Austria-Hungary. They didn't have the same problems of the repression of Ukrainian nationalism. They were able to speak Ukrainian, write in Ukrainian. They also have a very unique religious mix in terms of the Uniate Church. And so you have an Eastern Orthodox Church that follows the Eastern Orthodox rites, but it follows the rulings in the leadership of the Pope. And that's a very unique mixture in Ukraine because of this connection between Orthodoxy, but in the Catholic Austro-Hungarian Empire. So before 1939, really, you don't see the united Ukraine we have now. You don't really see that until 1939, because the Western part for the longest time was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Then after all the Austro-Hungarian Empire falls after World War I, it becomes part of Poland. So the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is key to this story, because in this pact, you have the Soviets agreeing with the Nazis to invade Poland. And that's when we see that part of Western Ukraine becoming joined to the east, is because of the Soviet invasion in 1939.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. And so then it becomes part of the then Soviet Union at that point. And as it becomes part of the Soviet Union, it is not it's not a chartered country at that point, right? It becomes more a region of the Soviet Union, or how did that work?
So this is special. The Soviet Union is officially established in 1922. And one of the reasons why you have this ethno-federal state is because of Ukraine. So the Soviets knew that they couldn't really have a powerful economy without the breadbasket, the Black Earth region of Ukraine. So the only way they could get this to work is to promote Ukrainian nationalism. So that's why you have the creation of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. And so the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, I can't say USSR because then it'll get even more confusing. It is part of the Soviet Union, and it's probably the second most powerful of the Soviet Socialist Republics, Russia being the most powerful. So when the West is conjoined to the East, it becomes part of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. And so that's really the first time we see West and East Ukraine that we see today fully connected. But Crimea is not part of this yet. It's not part of Ukraine until 1954.
Okay, and at what point does Stalin come in and says, and you know, you have a breadbasket, you have a lot of farmers, you have farmers who tend to, at least in my experience still in this country, very much in rural areas, you get a different relationship to the land, and the idea of collectivizing land becomes a little bit problematic. Stalin doesn't want that. What does Stalin do and when?
This is a great question. It's also the topic of my master's thesis.
Oh, well, I've asked the right person then.
So the first 5-year plan begins in 1928. So you have two parts. You have the forced collectivization of agriculture, which is Stalin's view necessary to get as much grain exports as possible to fund vast and very quick industrialization. So these two pieces go hand in hand in Stalin's 5-year plan. The problem is collectivization is hugely unpopular. I mean, it's particularly in Ukraine in the I'm trying to remember the word in English, the Black Earth region. So what happens is you have the initial push into the Ukrainian countryside by the Bolsheviks. They have this thing called the 25,000ers. So there are a lot of young Komsomol volunteers who go to the countryside to try to create collectivized farms. And unsurprisingly, they're not very successful. And one of my favorite things about my thesis work and research is reading the peasants and how they're reacting. They're like beating up these guys. They're like stealing their stuff and they're yelling at them. So like you see the video now of like the Ukrainian woman shaming the Russian soldier, like put these sunflower seeds in their pocket. That goes all the way back. We have, similar stories of them realizing the Bolsheviks don't know anything about agriculture. So yeah,
the analog today would be if you go into a rural area coming from a city, you're referred to as a citiot, and
yes,
there's that quality, right? Okay, so this is yes.
And so the response is by the Soviet government, well, if they're not going to join on their own, we'll make them join. And so one of the key things here is, I think, so when we think about the Holodomor, which is what it's called in Ukrainian, death by hunger, the famine that ensues in 1932-33 is a state-made famine. The Bolsheviks send in Komsomol activists, and so what they do is they take so much grain, there is no food left. And millions of people starve to death. And so this happens in Eastern Ukraine particularly, but throughout Ukraine, as famine happens, it happens in the southern region of Russia near the Don Basin, but also it happens in Kazakhstan. So you have this process, and it looks different across these three regions. But in Ukraine, not only was it the collectivization of agriculture, peasants were some of the most staunch Ukrainian nationalists. Because many of them remember when they were part of the Russian Empire and they couldn't speak their language. They weren't taught in their language. So they want to maintain Ukrainian culture and use Ukrainian language. So they see the Soviet forces through collectivization as yet another imposition upon them. And so millions of people die. And what I argue in my thesis is that this was part of the subjectivizing process. This is how Stalin turned the Ukrainian countryside into Soviet subjects. Because after 1933, once the famine dissipates and they start releasing more grain to the peasantry, you don't see huge uprisings in the countryside again. Before that, there were tons of uprisings, lots of violence towards Bolshevik activists in the collective farms. But after this, the majority of the farms are collectivized, and you don't really see that uproar in the countryside again.
What? I mean, what is that? Just simply like people? Is that a function of people have taken a beating, and or that when you have that level of conflict, the people who are most inclined to revolt are killed, imprisoned, weeded out, essentially? Is it that the deaths of those people just simply dissipates their collective power to respond in that instance? I mean, what are the factors that change the disposition? I mean, to subjectivize them, as you say.
I think it's a mixture of all the points you've made. And so what you see, and it's really heartbreaking. So in my thesis, I look at peasantry, I look at people who were part of the intelligentsia before the Russian Revolution in 1917, and I look at communist activists. And so the peasants, they learn that if they continue to fight, they're going to keep starving. So in a way, they just accept that collectivization is happening. But also they lose so many people. They literally do not have the strength to fight. The intelligentsia is interesting because the people I've studied, their diaries, they have this crisis of faith. They have this crisis, this existential crisis of what does it mean to be a person who still has food, but to watch everyone around you starve to death. And so a lot of them, like, they become depressed. Some of them turn to suicide because there's no way for them to, like, reconcile the position that they're in. But the communist activists tend to go in two groups. One, either they become gung-ho, communists, and their birth by fire has forged them as, complete Stalinist supporters, or the other half, and so many of them, they end up turning away, or they continue to be part of the Communist Party because that's the only way to get ahead. But many of them are victims of the purges in 1936, 1937. So they're imprisoned, they're sent to Siberia, they're killed. So I think it is a combination of things. But what I argue for the peasantry is that the famine broke the key means of survival in the countryside, which is, reciprocity and subsistence. And because their subsistence was taken away from them, the role of reciprocity in the village commune was destroyed. So, like, irreparable harm was done to the interpersonal connections. And so when that happens, you can't depend on your neighbor, so you must depend on the state, if that makes sense.
It does. And how much of that era remains in the public consciousness today or a week ago, when you were there?
It's huge, mostly because this is something people weren't able to talk about until the collapse of the Soviet Union. So 1991, you have, the creation of the independent Ukrainian state, but it's only been about the last 12, 15 years that the Holodomor has become part of the Ukrainian national consciousness. It's been added to textbooks. We have a Holodomor memorial. And so for the first time, like when I was there in 2013, I was talking to people about my research and I said, my grandmother remembers that. My grandpa remembers that. My parents remember that. And it was the first time their parents and grandparents had talked about these experiences. There's a lot of shame for people who survived because there's also widespread reports of cannibalism. So, like, it's a very complicated process for Ukrainians to go through. And what I have seen, like, I read Ukrainian, I speak and read Russian, I'm learning how to speak Ukrainian. Now we're seeing more instances of, look at what they did to us in 1932-33, because of the images we're seeing in Ukraine now, where cities that are encircled are starting to run out of food. So this is very much part of the national memory, and they're bringing it up right now, for sure, on the ground in Ukraine.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's almost like you know, their version of the Dunning School, I guess, on some level, or you know, a slightly different dynamic now. But that this is there seems to be a reawakened awareness of it, and poorly timed, at least relative to what I think the expectations were of Putin. So let's move up to the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine becomes independent. It retains both East and West, and it also has a sizable amount. Like you say, it was the second most powerful member, essentially, of the Soviet Union. Also has a sizable amount of nuclear weapons that they have control over. I don't think people understood this, that like the weapons sort of became the property of where they were stationed. And so this is where we start getting into the other part that is ostensibly part of Putin's motivation, of which I am not as skeptical as a lot of people. I don't think it explains the majority of the story, frankly. I think it is there's a certain amount of convenience that it exists, but it's not like there weren't people in the United States in the mid-90s in our Senate, guys like Sam Nunn, Daniel Moynihan. These are not necessarily, doves who are saying we should not be expanding NATO, never mind Ukraine. We should not be expanding it. There were some who were saying like, we're done with it. It served its purpose. But there was a deal with Ukraine by the West. Talk about that.
Yes, the 1994 Budapest memorandums. So what Ukraine did was, in exchange for promises of the recognition of its territorial sovereignty by the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia, Ukraine gave up its entire nuclear arsenal. And so that promise was actually held until about 2013, when we saw the Russian reaction to the Euromaidan protests. And what has been interesting is I have Ukrainian friends who are saying that was a mistake.
Is there another example of that? I mean, there may have been other former Soviet republics, but I mean, we've seen this dynamic with, Iran and North Korea, and I think it was maybe Libya stopped its pursuit of nuclear weapons, I think, at one point. And this is a bad lesson to be teaching.
It is. It's a dangerous lesson because, I believe President Zelenskyy said it last week. He was like, well, if the Budapest memorandum isn't going to be upheld, you're not going to uphold your end. Why should we uphold ours?
It reminds me a little of what we're seeing with the Iran deal in the United States. Although, yeah. Why would we disarm ourselves if you're just going to break the promise right afterwards?
And I think this is kind of something that hasn't been mentioned a lot, is everyone's watching what's happening in Ukraine. And the lessons that are being imparted, not only to Western countries, but countries who are considered second-tier powers, but who are considering nuclear development, this is a very important lesson for them to learn. But also, like, Ukraine still has nuclear power, as we saw yesterday. The Zaporozhye, nuclear power station was shelled. Chernobyl is controlled by the Russian military. So I think the nuclear question, both nuclear power, as France is pursuing nuclear power through the EU, but also nuclear weapons. These two questions are being settled right now in Ukraine on the ground.
So the Budapest memos signed by the U.S., Russia, and the EU at that point, or no, the
United Kingdom.
United Kingdom, and so there's at least one of our I think sort of broken promises. There was also, my understanding too, simultaneously at that time, was I think it was Gorbachev. I don't know if there was an explicit signed document, but there was also a sense that NATO would not be expanded as part of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. What can you tell us about that?
So the agreement, the question, this is one of like the mysterious parts of studying the end of the Soviet Union. So Yeltsin gets a verbal confirmation from, I can't remember the American diplomat's name, but this is actually about East Germany. So after Germany
Right.
reunited, it was the question of expanding NATO and allowing all of Germany, united Germany, into NATO. And so NATO is an important question, but I think what's interesting now is we're seeing the limits of NATO in the current Russian invasion of Ukraine. But also, Ukraine hasn't really pursued NATO, like joining NATO. It wasn't actually popular in Ukraine. It has never been more popular in the past 2 weeks, so that's the problem. But yeah, Ukrainian public opinion has actually been split on NATO for years. But it was after Euromaidan in which Ukraine decided, and I believe they've added to the constitution, that they would pursue joining NATO. It was after the Russian incursion in 2013. I argue like the EU is much more important to Ukraine and has been. So if you remember the news in 2013, I came back from Ukraine a couple of months before the Euromaidan protests started. And so the Euromaidan protests started because President Yanukovych, he did not sign the EU association agreement. And the thinking was, this is because Putin, he was pro-Russian, very aligned with Putin, that Putin had pretty much told him not to. So you start seeing popular protests springing up all around Ukraine, particularly in Maidan na Zhalosty, or the Independence Square. And so these protests happen, but Yanukovych uses the special forces and they kill 100 civilians. These are called the Heavenly 100. And every year they celebrate, these 100 civilians who were killed by the special forces. So the protests get bigger, they spread across more of Ukraine, and Yanukovych ends up fleeing to Russia. And I think he spent some time in Belarus. So you have the new, Ukrainian government that's elected, that's put together. And so this is when—
And I'm sorry, can I just stop you there? In terms of the protests, how were they dispersed east-west?
So a lot in the west, also really strong in the east, like Kiev is in the middle, but Kharkiv, Odessa, they're spread throughout, Ukraine, but they're very heavy in Western Ukraine, which makes sense because Western Ukraine has very strong ties to Poland, which is also, trying to join the EU. So when you have the new Ukrainian government that's formed, they held elections, and this is when interesting things start happening. Interesting if you are a historian and you're a nerd, not interesting if you have to live through these, right, situations. So two things happen, Luhansk and Donetsk. So in Russian, there's a word in Ukrainian, it's called oblast. So if you think about an oblast, it's like a super region. So you have Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, and within Luhansk and Donetsk, you have smaller sections like counties, also called Luhansk and Donetsk, which is why sometimes Russian Ukrainian just makes more sense. So these two regions, these two counties in these regions, Luhansk and Donetsk, they are called breakaway regions or occupied regions, depending on where you are. So you have pro-Russian forces there who are armed by Russia, and they start fighting against Ukrainian forces. So these two places are disputed. But within these two places, you also have thousands of Ukrainians who live and work and are just trying to exist within that. Those become the basis for the war that we see, right now. But also you have the annexation of Crimea. So in 2014, you have a memorandum, which was totally unfair. Besides the fact that election officials weren't even able to watch, they were nowhere near where the elections was happening. The boxes were clear, they were outside, and you had little green men, because they weren't recognizing themselves as Russian, but everyone knew they were Russian military, pointing guns at you as you voted. So Crimea is forcibly annexed by Ukraine. This is illegal, but it still happens. And what's wild is overnight, once Crimea is forcibly annexed and recognized by Russia, the laws change. And a key part of this story is what happens to the minority population, the Crimean Tatars, who are the indigenous population of Crimea. They have experienced absolute hell from the Soviet period onward. They were forcibly deported by the Stalinist government. Many of them were sent to Central Asia. Many of them died. And once the Soviet Union collapses, they're able to come back to Crimea. And so since then, since the Russian takeover in 2014, their community leaders have been oppressed. They've been thrown into prison. Their religious practices have been repressed by the Russian government, and many of them have had to leave and go into exile. many of them in mainland Ukraine, but also many in Canada. So these processes that we're seeing now, I will fundamentally argue, are because of what happened in 2013 and 2014.
Well, and so in terms of like the pro-Russian sentiment in Crimea, like, do you think that that's overblown in terms of, because you're basically saying that there are indigenous populations in Crimea that are being silenced in terms of like the sentiment when it's when we're looking at I guess a post-mortem of what happened in 2013 and 2014.
Absolutely. And so there are pro-Russian, pro-Putin forces in like Luhansk and Donetsk and Crimea. But so the problem is with Crimea, the Russian population in Crimea is a result of the deportation of Crimean Tatars. It's another form of like new settler colonization. You get rid of the Crimean Tatars, this land and all these homes open up. So a lot of Russian Soviet citizens moved into Crimea, because Crimea has always been a popular vacation spot, even in the Imperial Russian period. So if like you got tuberculosis, you would go to Crimea to get the warm weather and to help your lungs check off. So what happens is, so these pro-Russian forces, they are there and they do exist. And that's definitely an important part of the dynamics you see in Crimea now, but also Luhansk and Donetsk. But Luhansk and Donetsk, this has been a hot war for 8 years there, right? So, and I think the media and the way things are being portrayed in Ukraine right now is very interesting to me, because I'm like, y'all have not cared for 8 years.
I want to get into that change, and we've had 14,000 people die over the course of those 8 years. Who were those people that died, and how? And then I want to get into this change that has taken place. Where, I mean, I remember when Russia annexed Crimea. I remember when the separatists took over. I remember the protest, and there was, it was mostly like, frankly, neocons who were, people like John McCain who were, talking about it, but there was just very little reporting, very little. There was no images. It was, I personally was fairly ignorant as to where Ukraine was. I don't think I was aware. Like, you don't call it the Ukraine anymore. I mean, all of that. But but first, talk about the 14,000 people who have died in those 8 years in this hot war. Who's been fighting? How have those people died? And then let's talk about this change, which, I think I mentioned beforehand was. How the first tweet I saw was of yours was talking about that change in why all of a sudden Europe was opening their doors, and the world was, very quickly, becoming in solidarity with the Ukrainians.
Those really great questions, and I'm so glad you asked about the 14,000 people have died in eastern Ukraine. So it's a mixture. You have Ukrainian army who have died in combat against the pro-Russian separatists. You have a lot of civilians who've died. I mean, crossfire, shelling. They still use artillery in Luhansk and Donetsk. They've dropped artillery on civilian places. So you have civilian.
The separatists have dropped, or the Ukrainian army?
Yeah, the separatists. So you have the Ukrainian army and the separatists using weapons and artillery against each other.
They're both hitting civilians.
Yeah.
In there. Okay.
And so like people are dying. And so when people talk about the Russo-Ukrainian war, I'm like, of 2022, because this has been happening for so long. But also, and Secretary Blinken tweeted about this today, but like everyone who works on Ukraine, who speaks Russian or Ukrainian, we've known there are torture camps in Luhansk and Donetsk. I mean, if you are a Ukrainian and you're captured by the Luhansk and Donetsk separatists, I don't even want to, the story, like electrocution, waterboarding, they are torturing people, especially if they catch Ukrainian civilians who are helping the Ukrainian military. And so they're also part of this large number of people who've died. So Hromadsky.ua, it's a Ukrainian language news site, but also they do lifestyle reporting. They cover a lot of information. They're also available in English, but their Ukrainian coverage, they've been interviewing people who have survived, these torture camps, who've been able to get out. So it's a mixture of kind of the worst elements of war is what we've seen in the past 8 years. But all like these people, there are civilians, and also I would argue, like, I don't know the specific number, but also Ukrainian military have been dying.
And what's your sense of both Russian money flowing in terms of separatists, and maybe Western money in terms of like the opposition? Like there are a lot of ghouls here in the United States that are trying to look at, like, how can we make Ukraine a proxy battle to weaken Putin? I mean, we covered this a little bit earlier in the show, and I'm concerned about that. But like on a micro level, has that been going on for a little while?
So we know for sure most of the artillery, the guns, the weapons are coming from Russia. But that's the benefit of being pro-Russian, because they should not have access to these types of things from the Ukrainian side. But also, like, after you kill off a Ukrainian battalion, take their stuff. And that's kind of, the rules of the game in the East. I don't know about like foreign involvement in the war, but also it's one of those things, like, I have no idea, like, MI6, CIA, so, you would never know. But I do know, when we look at what's happening now and the way it was started by Russia recognizing Luhansk and Donetsk as independent, I expected that to happen in 2014. So that wasn't new to me. But I am interested in the end game here. And like, because everyone's talking about, will Putin have an off ramp and, things like that. But just from what I've seen, and like, I'm in contact with the people on the ground and stuff like that, the Luhansk, Donetsk, Kharkiv, they're being flattened. So even if this does become like a Russian occupied area, there's not much left to occupy, if that makes sense.
It's also, I mean, this is like, I think we have limited value, I think, in jumping ahead and imagining where things are going, because I don't, but it seems also it's going to be a very difficult territory to occupy. I don't think that, like, this is not going to be, there's going to be a lot of overextension by Russians and a lot of anger on the part of Ukrainians that I don't think is going to easily dissipate. But I don't know. But so okay, let's turn to this to the differences between 2014 and 2022 relative to the way that the rest of the world envisions Ukraine, because I think you made this point, and it's also, I think, indicative of like your studies of race in the context of Europe, particularly in Ukraine. I did also I saw you tweet about the idea of race in Poland, and you specifically wouldn't address that because it wasn't part of your expertise, which I appreciated, because it's pretty hard to find people who do that. But to me, it speaks to the social construction of race, of status in some fashion. So let's talk about that. But I want to, and I guess at one point too, I want to talk about the idea of neo-Nazis in Ukraine, the ideas of the Azov, regiment. And let me also just preface this too, because this gets into very sensitive stuff where people feel like you're doing Putin's job by, saying that there is a neo-Nazi element in Ukraine. We're not doing Putin's job here. We're discussing certain realities. There's also, incidentally, there was a neo-Nazi, as far as I was concerned, or pretty close, maybe not quite, version of CPAC just a couple of days ago in Orlando. So it's not like that develops the whole country. But all right, so I'm sorry, I asked about 4 questions there, but take it from there in terms of like what has changed in terms of the way that we look at Ukrainians. By we, I mean non-Ukrainians.
Right. And like, as I, tweeted, I said, this is really new, where everyone's opening their arms to Ukrainians and saying, they're just like us. They're blonde haired, and blue eyed, which if you've been to Ukraine, that's not true. But it shows this projection of whiteness and sameness onto Ukrainians that we didn't see in 2013. We didn't see in 2014. And honestly, we hadn't really seen until Russia literally put tanks into Ukraine. So Ukraine has always been multilingual and multi-ethnic. It has a large Roma population. It has large, as we've seen, African, Middle Eastern population. But Ukraine, as many as other Eastern European countries and Southern European countries, and we think about the hierarchy of race in Western Europe, they've always been at the bottom. You see, even in like, popular culture, references to how, Russians are treated or how Ukrainian, they're always gangsters, right? Or they're always, I'm trying to, like, Gwopniks, like they have tracksuits and they're a punchline, or they are cleaners, or they're paid low wage jobs. And so what's interesting in Western Europe is that, and I would argue that this new embracing of Ukraine, one, comes from realizing just how little they did in 2014 to, stave off what's happening right now, but also it helps you keep Ukrainians in Eastern Europe, though. So we have Poland opening the borders, Hungary is opening its borders. What about Germany? What about France? What about the UK? So you still have this underlying thing where we don't want all of those people coming in. But I think the key thing that has changed is the Russian onslaught. And I was in a panel earlier, and this professor made an excellent point. She said, instead of thinking about, how everyone is welcoming Ukraine, think about what Ukraine had to go through to be welcomed into whiteness. And I think that is a powerful way to frame what we're seeing in Ukraine, because at the end of the day, Ukraine's still fighting this war alone. And I think that shows the limits to this narrative of they're just like us. But even I think it was one of the major Western journalists, talking heads on the ground, he said, they're relatively civilized.
Oh, yes. We've seen a lot of these examples.
Yeah. And I'm like, that.
Unlike Iraq, unlike Afghanistan, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
They're still relatively civilized, right? Yeah. So I think that word relatively, they're telling on themselves. But also we saw the Bulgarian prime minister saying, these aren't the refugees we're used to. They're educated. But it's because Ukraine's also in Eastern Europe. So yeah, Ukraine is very much closer to Bulgaria. But overall, what we're seeing here is the framework of this white supremacist understanding of hierarchy that we see in Western Europe, and it's showing itself through these media, representations of Ukraine, but most importantly, with what we're seeing at the borders, with Africans and Middle Eastern students and Indian students and Roma citizens of Ukraine trying to get into Poland. And so this conflict is putting on display for the world things that people who look like me, who live and work in Eastern Europe, have always known. So it's been interesting. But let's talk about Azov. Let's talk about Azov.
I want to stay just on this point just for one more minute, then we'll get to Azov, because this is almost like a real-time version of that book, How the Irish Became White, type of situation. But you make the point that in this instance, we can also see a real-time limitations on that, both in terms of how much people want to absorb Ukrainians, period, but also the Afro-Ukrainian population that is in the Ukraine, or in Ukraine, I should say, and how it's like there has been at least a dynamic of this may be slight bridge too far on some level just expand on that a little bit, because I know that you've been in touch, obviously, with students there, and with both Africans who are in Ukraine, maybe studying or whatnot, or descendants of, in many respects, of students.
Mm-hmm. So, which is funny because, like, people said I made up the Afro-Ukrainian community, and I'm like, that's cool. I literally discovered Afro-Ukrainians because I ran into a couple of them in the street in Kiev, and I was like, you exist? So yes, there is an Afro-Ukrainian population. Many of them are descendants of African students who studied in the Soviet Union and Ukraine and settled down and had families. The most famous is Jean Villeneuve. He's a member of the Ukrainian parliament, but also he is a gold medal Greco-Roman wrestler. He won gold for Ukraine in the Summer Olympics. And so this population exists. And when you see some of these horror stories of racism at the border, this is important because these are Ukrainians, and their Slavicness, their Ukrainianness is being denied to them because of their Africanness. And you're seeing this play out in real time. And what's been so fascinating to me, I mean, even the EU, we're singing, Kumbaya and everyone welcome to our borders. But the EU declaration for refugees from Ukraine yesterday does not include third country nationals. All of these foreign students who are having to flee, they don't get free passage. If you're an asylum seeker from Syria or Afghanistan, many of whom live in Ukraine, you don't get free passage into the EU.
Despite the fact that they're in Ukraine getting bombed. And,
yes.
and I mean, so it really is, I would imagine, and hopefully this conflict ends, before we air this interview, frankly, but this is going to be, a fascinating opportunity to see how these constructions work. And I should say that, like, the civilized thing, I have seen deployed in the context of Israel welcoming Ethiopian and second order Ethiopian Jews trying to make Aliyah to Israel, where the absorption of Ethiopians is more difficult with people who may have been living in the countryside, may have not seen running water, may not have, are used to sort of the way that Western countries or, European styled countries function and are organized. So there may be some costs associated, but that's often a way of, like, I mean, that's a way of, I think, sort of hiding the ball a little bit. And
For
we
sure.
see it in this context very clearly. All right. So speak about the Azov regiment and this idea of neo-Nazis. Certainly there were Ukrainians who were aligned with the Nazis during World War II, but talk about those and then get into the neo-Nazis as well.
So this is an excellent point, and I think that some people want to run away from this history, but we can't. And so particularly in Western Ukraine during World War II, you had nationalist groups like the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalism, OUN. And so what they did was they collaborated with the Nazis. So they were fighting against the Soviets and collaborating with the Nazis. So that's one element of this, is that Western Ukraine is invaded by the Soviet Union. So when the Nazis invade the Soviet Union in 1941, they join, right? The enemy is my friend. That's one layer. The second layer is the anti-Semitism and the hatred of Jews. That's another thing that bonded these partisan groups to, and not, of course, not all partisan groups, but like the OUN with the Nazis. And this is important because, and Tim Snyder, his book Bloodlands, it's like a good introduction for this for like lay readers. When we think about the Holocaust, so many people think of Auschwitz, Birkenau, they think of the camps, but the overwhelming majority of the Eastern European Jews were in Belarus, in Ukraine, and Poland. This goes back to the Russian Empire, because that was the only place they could settle, is in that strip of land called the Pale Lev settlement. So millions of Jews were killed in Ukraine. The Ukrainian Jewish population was decimated. So was that of Belarus. So this plays a key part in this history of Ukraine. So you have this partisan part, and Bandera, who's probably the most famous of all the partisans, he goes into exile and he never renounces what he did when he was collaborating with the Nazis. And so when we move to now, Azov Battalion, and someone asked me, well, was the Azov Battalion, were you afraid of them when you were in Ukraine? I'm like, they didn't exist when I was in Ukraine. Azov Battalion is a direct growth of 2014, Luhansk and Donetsk, and the fighting there. So the Azov Battalion is a far-right neo-Nazi group, and they, arm themselves to fight in Eastern Ukraine against these far Russian forces. So they're hyper-nationalistic, and they're also anti-Semitic, and they're also racist. Let me just say, like, the fact that neo-Nazis exist in Ukraine and in Russia will never not make me angry as a Soviet historian who knows about World War II. Like, it's ridiculous, but that's for another day. So that's a battalion. They became popular because they were fighting against these far right, the pro-Russian forces. But in the past 5 years, something interesting has happened with Azov. So they've grown more marginalized within greater Ukrainian society, but the Azov battalion itself has been absorbed into the Ukrainian National Guard. And that's how they were continuing to fight in the east in Luhansk and Donetsk. One of their most famous members, I forget his name, but he was voted into the Ukrainian parliament. I think a few more of their members they've made the professionalization where you go from wearing your neo-Nazi fatigues to wearing a suit, and then that part. So I think Azov and members of Azov, who they've kind of expanded from just focusing on fighting into trying to create a national political party, they got less than 3% of the vote. I think it's less than 5 or less than 3% of the vote in the latest parliamentary elections. So that's to put that on the table because it's important and we have to recognize it. I lived in Ukraine. I had a run-in with skinheads. Like, these are very, real things. And I think this is important because if we hide this history, it does nothing but support Putin's idea of what Ukraine is. When he says he's going to denazify the country, when he calls, the entire Ukrainian government fascist or neo-Nazi. If you don't talk about these important aspects of Ukrainian culture and history, then when people find it, it's like, oh, we've been hiding that. You don't want us to know that. And admittedly, and I think a lot of people, it's like Ukrainian members of parliament and government, they don't want to focus on that because they think it will draw away from support for Ukraine. And I understand where they're coming from, but I think you have to address this full on because then you can see and talk about, so when Putin says he's denazifying a country, he's focusing on Azov Battalion and some of the far right groups in Ukraine to generalize for the entire country, including a country led by a Jewish president and a Jewish prime minister. So these are like the important things, and I think we shouldn't hide it. But and this isn't whataboutism, but it's also Putin is projecting because you want to talk about the granddaddy of far right and neo-Nazi groups, Russia. And so, yeah, Russia has similar problem. I mean, and as you said earlier, this is a problem of the far right across Eastern Europe, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Russia, Ukraine. None of these countries is exempt from this particular development.
And again, Steve Scalise, I think at one point is reported to have said at one point, "I'm David Duke without the baggage" when he was running for his position back in the day. So, which is not in any way, obviously, to diminish the presence of these, but it's not a defining element of Ukraine. Well, Kimberly, I can't thank you enough. I feel like this has been an amazing assessment of history and get a sense of where we are, and hopefully, maybe we can touch base again to talk more about some of these issues as hopefully, God willing, things calm down. It's hard. Here we're recording this on Friday. We'll play this probably on Monday to get a sense of where the step down is. Do you have any ideas on that? I mean, maybe in closing. I mean, I know that is sort of like outside of maybe of your portfolio, but having had experience in Ukraine and probably someone who's been sensitive to these issues over the course, because I think there was a lot of people who felt like Plan A was maybe just thought they'd be greeted with flowers and candy, and we get rid of Zelenskyy. Maybe we have to kill him, and because there's reportedly been multiple hit squads been sent to kill him. The validity of which, it's very difficult in the context of war to know how true these things are. But largely, people thought the idea was replace the government. Ukrainians will be more or less okay with that. And, then we don't even have to have much of a military presence. Probably after a couple of months, we go back, everything's back to normal. It's like Crimea. And, occasionally somebody says there's a problem, but that's it. That's clearly not happening. What are the other options?
So I think the killing Zelenskyy and replacing him is still on the table. And they've been floating, like if you watch the Russian news, Yanukovych. Yeah, he's back into vogue. But I think a key thing is we have to watch what happens over the next few days. If Ukraine is continuing to fight this alone, Ukraine can't defeat Russia by contemporary and normal military means. It just doesn't have the resources. So the Russian news has shown multiple times of what a rump state Ukraine would look like. So think about the North Korea, South Korea solution. It seems like that is in the Kremlin's interest. It's kind of carving up Ukraine, having Eastern Ukraine not be part of Russia, but having a government that will essentially be a puppet state for Russia. And I think that's a key thing here. That's why we've seen whenever they're going to have peace talks, you have the nuclear deterrence forces called up, or before we have peace talks, we're going to, shell Zaporozhye nuclear power station. So I think those are key developments to kind of watch, because we're continuing to see this. But I don't hold any hope in Putin's peace talks, but also understanding Putin as a person who believes in realpolitik. And people like to say, oh, he's a KGB agent, and oh, he doesn't have a soul, and blah, blah, blah. None of that's useful. What he is an astute politician who understands hard power, boots on the ground. And he learned this from Yalta, from World War II, wherever the Soviet tanks were, wherever the Soviet men were, that was in your sphere of influence. That is still very much the case. And I think what Putin is showing also is the limits of these Western institutions. And also, they can't save you. And I think that's a key lesson that he's imparting to the former Soviet states. But I don't know how we get out of this. I think it's up to Vladimir Putin to decide how this ends.
Kimberly St, Julian Varnon, really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kimberly. Really fascinating stuff. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report.
Vigeland.
I was a little rusty. I hadn't talked for an hour, and so
Team Seder.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I should read some feedback that we did get on the interview. This IM came during the interview from Not Sam's ex-wife. I understand that this is a pre-recorded interview from Friday, but Sam looks entirely too casual for a Monday. His commitment issues are on full display for all to see. Is it too much to ask for Sam to change his shirt to a stiff, freshly pressed button down for the interview? Christ, no one is asking him to wear a tie. That is from Not Sam's ex-wife on the IM. Appreciate the feedback, of course, at all times.
Always.
To any interview. Going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program. Just a couple of reminders for you. JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. You get 10% off. Just Coffee. I don't know what else to tell you. You can get the Majority Report blend there too.
Oh, yeah.
Check that out.
Great coffee.
Also, don't forget our live shows, MajorityLive.com. You can go and buy a streaming ticket for our show in Brooklyn. If you sign up at amquickie.com first, you can see the coupon code. There's a link in that AM Quickie newsletter that you'll get tomorrow, and you will save over 50% on a live streaming show. Yes, it's actually possible. People ask, how is that possible? We didn't realize the coupon codes could go that high because no one has ever offered more than 50% off a streaming thing.
It's a world record.
Apparently. People didn't even know that it was physically possible to do that.
Many people are saying.
And so you can sign up at amquickie.com and get that. And of course, we still have tickets for the Boston show. And I'm telling you, the Boston show is a show that you're going to walk away from and say, I can't believe I was lucky enough to go to that.
Life-changing.
Well, let's not get carried away, but the bar is pretty low for things that people are lucky to do.
Well, the bars, anything can change your life. It'll change your life. I mean, anything can be life-changing.
That's true.
Right.
Yes.
Just because you've gone to something, it did in some way alter your life.
That's true. It's true. I could have been sitting at home doing nothing today, but instead my life changed and I went and saw this show.
That's the definition I was operating.
All right. Well, then, yes, I would say that times 2 almost. Folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-3501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You call it satire. Sam goes with satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland, on the fun half of the Majority Report, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get right to it. Opening up the phone lines. People really enjoyed that guest.
I mean, she's
A Square. Great. Oh my God, Sam and Emma, how did you find that guest? First time I heard anyone talk about the possibility of carving Ukraine in East and West. History repeats. Told a millennial the other day that baby boomers and older gens need to die out. We just can't give up on these old, dated, retrograde ways, politics, and mythologies. Not sure I know. Basically found her via Twitter. I don't know. Ukraine. Why is there so much lying going on in the Western media about the war? The Nazis in Mariupol are not letting civilians leave, not the other way around. And I finally figured out what Putin was saying about drug addicts. Drug addict is Zelenskyy, according to some sources. Can you confirm that?
What are you talking about? Like, yes, there.
Yes, of course we can confirm it.
Right.
We are in Brooklyn, and my pot dealer, who rides to my house
right
on a bicycle, came in the other day and was like, "Dude, guess who I've been selling to? Who? To Zelenskyy." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah,
the hard stuff."
No, just all sorts of bud.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, "How do you do that on your bike?" Because I ride there, long way.
It's like a Mary Poppins situation.
Maddie the boy, happy birthday. What's that?
That was hilarious, but whatever. Keep going.
What, the Mary Poppins situation?
Yes, tooting my own horn.
I
She flies on her bike. She flies on her bike.
No, she doesn't.
Yes,
she flies
does.
with an umbrella.
Oh, fuck. Who flies on their bike?
The Wicked Witch of the West.
Yes.
Before she
Yeah.
Damn it.
I mean, if it was funny, I would have laughed at it, but it was a misreference.
It sucked. All right, it sucked.
I mean,
I suck.
Did you never see Mary Poppins?
Yes, I loved it, but I got mixed up.
That's like there's a phenomenon for that, like where you remember things that are wrong.
What would you call it?
There's a name for it. I don't know. But I because of my children, have watched Mary Poppins probably more recently than you have.
Yeah. All right.
So there you go.
The Mandela effect, Sam?
That's what it is.
Okay,
Maddie the boy, happy birthday, Saul. Emma's really pissed. Left of the box. Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch MR as often as I used to. That's because I just became partners with the Young Turks to contribute to Rebel HQ. It's about time. The world's largest online progressive network partners with a Canadian, eh? You and Michael were major influences on me. It would mean the world for you to come on my show so I can thank you in person. Thanks to the wonderful MR community. Everyone has been extremely supportive. My videos will start going up this week. Please head over to Rebel HQ on YouTube and check them out. I'm super nervous and can use all the encouragement I can get.
It'll be fine.
Congratulations. That's great. That's great news,
awesome.
of course. Send us an email. We'll work something out. Jen Hexer, it's my birthday tomorrow, but I'm going to bug you about that tomorrow. Okay. Teacher Dan, does being a wartime president give the Biden administration the slack the party establishment needs to move decisively into the Reagan zone and A, leave behind any pretense that there was ever an intent to deliver a Biden agenda? How is that the Reagan zone? I don't understand that question. Will Jake Tapper, Chuck Todd, and Chris Hayes start just straight up asking progressive guests who question party priorities, why do you hate America? Also, Cortland apples are the best. How do you like them apples? Well, I think the hyping of the Cortland apples has as much soundness as your other premises. I don't know what that means, the Reagan zone. I don't understand that. I don't know who, this is the thing that doesn't make any sense. The party establishment, you've got a category error somewhere in there in terms of like who this would appeal to. Like the intent that there was ever to deliver a Biden agenda, which I gather you're skeptical about. The vast majority of Democratic voters seem to not really care about the specifics of the Biden agenda. Certainly the Republicans are against it. That would have been for the activist base. And the idea that this gives him an opportunity to not fulfill things for the activist base doesn't really make any sense either. I would imagine that Jake Tapper and Chuck Todd may do that. I don't think Chris Hayes will start asking progressive guests who question party priorities. Why do you hate America? No. Rory Gatto. Holy effing shit. I have the same birthday as Saul. There can be only one.
It's going to be Saul.
Urgent. Sam MR crew. Chat is unfortunately enabled. Please disable chat ASAP. Thank you. Isaac Asimov Battalion. Hot take alert. Nazis bad.
Yeah.
Stam Seder.
Well, all right, maybe we'll get into this. Like, yes, the Nazis are bad. Like, there are far right elements in many countries, including our own. Yes, the Azov battalion is bad. Doesn't change the fundamental immorality of the war.
Sam Seder, D's nuts, Baba Booey, 42069. Amish carpenter, MIDI doctors has a history of punching fascists in the face. F around and you find out. YouTube chat for life. Tim Poop, is something up with your noise gate or bit rate for vocals or something? If you listen to the raw audio on YouTube, it kind of causes the music or background sounds to cut out. We've got to figure that out. I don't know if that's not a Theo question. That's a problem with our board. This has nothing to do with any crew substituting in for other missing crew, as it's been doing this since y'all moved to the new setup. Maybe the lo-fi vibe is intentional. I've got no idea. As Bo the Fifth said, a no-fly zone would basically be declaring war with a few extra steps. Very, very bad idea. Odd question, but since we don't tax back the money a dead person has, would that have any noticeable impact on the amount of money in circulation versus the amount of things that can be done with it, i.e. inflation? You mean the money that a dead person has? I don't understand. We have an estate tax. It has a far, far too high of a threshold, in my opinion. But in which I don't think the first tax dollars for a couple are taxed until you get to like $10 or $11 million. I think that still remains from the Trump years. But I'm not sure I follow the question. Tickle, fart. Okay. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Casey from Spokane, Washington.
Casey from Spokane, Washington. What's on your mind?
Hey, I wanted to talk a bit about mostly the inflation and monetary policy. But before I got to inflation, you had, I guess about 2 weeks ago, you guys were talking about QE a bit.
Yeah.
Mostly through the 2010s.
Yeah.
I had just a couple quick notes on that. One that I thought it would deserve noting the QE's effect on the Social Security account in the last 12 years.
Quantitative easing on the Social Security Trust Fund.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's what's the number I have is the between 2008 and 2009 and 2019, 27% growth in the trust fund, but the annual interest it was receiving had dropped 30% total. So, and that's from quantitative easing.
Okay, so you're saying that the impact of quantitative easing, because interest rates were so low?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So and which aren't necessarily the same thing. You understand that, though, right? I mean,
no, the Fed's purchases on the secondary market, they lower the yields of the Treasury bonds, and when the Treasury issues new bonds, it uses the secondary market yield as the interest rate.
Okay.
So when it is issuing those bonds to the Social Security Fund after Congress spends our money, so those rates given to the Social Security Fund would be artificially lower because of the Fed's purchases on the open market.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what you mean by artificially. It's all artificial, though, isn't it? Right. I mean, it's all, it's like saying we have a fiat currency. Yes, we do. Our currency.
No. I mean, the way it was planned out is the Treasury bond yield is it's an open market. It's a free market. It's whatever the yield is, it's based on price. But when the Fed is buying 20% of the bonds out there, that price is artificially higher. That's what I mean.
Okay. So,
right.
It inhibited the interest accrual in the Social Security Trust Fund.
Right. I'm not sure what date it's going to be run out of money, but I don't have those numbers, but it'll be much faster than it was before. Yeah, and actually, and that is compounded by the crappy government inflation. What do they use? PCE or something?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, okay. Keep going. We gotta. All right. So is that it, or what else did you have?
Oh, you mentioned one thing. You said that the other countries weren't printing money during the pandemic, but they were just as not as much as we were.
Right.
But, so
yes.
Okay. And then just on the inflation, just in general, I think that people are really slow to blame the Federal Reserve, who I ran the numbers. These are my numbers from early 2021. They because of the printing they caused a 30% change in M3 and a 70% increase in the M1 money supply. There was always going to be inflation, and it wasn't just how much they printed, which was $2 trillion in 2.5 months.
Did we print more money than Europe?
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
Okay,
in the EU,
and like significantly more, right?
50% more.
50% more. Is our inflation 50% more than in Europe?
Europe, it's inflation.
No, the answer is no. Right. I mean, like our inflation.
Yeah, you're right.
Our inflation is a little bit higher, but of course, we have our supply lines were also more problematic, and I suspect there was also more switching in terms of what the demand is a function. I mean, so I think the idea, is it possible that some of the inflation was driven by the printing of money? It's possible, but I think the overall evidence is such that it's not the case. You can find a correlation between when the government was printing more money over the course of COVID, but I suspect there were also other things that were happening at that time and just because it was happening at the same time, all of this stuff with COVID was happening at the same time. And so I don't think there is sufficient evidence that this is a function of an overheated economy where there's too much money out there for our production capacity. There's just too many other factors that have been going on that I think have led us into this inflation. To the extent that we have inflation, the type inflation, that's what it is. But
there's definitely too much money out there. That all the markets are seriously overflated. It's just I'll say that of course that yes, that the supply lines and that has something to do with inflation, and there were other things, but I think
what markets are inflated that are impacting inflation?
Oh, lumber. Have you looked at the lumber?
Yeah. Have you looked at what's going on in Canada with the beetles? Have you looked at what's going on in terms of building? I mean, we had a run.
Beetles.
Yeah, beetles.
Yeah. It was a 300% increase. Yeah. So I got it up here. 2001. Lumber is at
no, I know how much lumber goes. I know I buy plywood on a regular basis, but I'm telling you that there are other factors. The idea that there is so much money sloshing around in the lumber market, and that is why, because we printed so much money, is absurd.
What else? Let me think of another.
You said. Wait a second. Listen to me. You just said that there's so much money sloshing around in the markets. Did you not mean the financial markets? You meant the commodity markets.
I meant, no, market. What you want to? Sorry, all the markets. Anything you can invest in.
Yes, people. Are you saying that people are investing in lumber and it is raising the lumber futures have been driving the price of this? I don't understand what your argument is.
That's exactly what happened.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Because when there's so much more, there's so much money that there was nothing to do with the money, especially because you
so wait a second. So your argument is there was so much money sloshing around that people started investing in lumber futures. And that drove up the price of lumber?
In speculation, yeah.
I would need to see. You can email me the evidence that you have for that, because I'd be very curious. That would be a fascinating market to speculate in that way in terms of lumber during the midst of a pandemic. But I mean, maybe you're right. I don't know.
If you I will email you. But if you look at any commodity with that's kind of a producer of something that makes products, like not gold, but it will. The
mountain pine. I want you to also look up, since you never heard of this, the mountain pine beetle in May of 2021.
Right.
Attacked 50% of 18 million hectares of forest. Go and look in what's happening in March and May in the spring of what happened to the supplies of Canadian pine. But I appreciate the.
You said in May of
2021.
Oh, 2021.
Yep. All right.
Okay. Talk
to you later. Send me an email.
I will. Thanks, Sam.
All right, bye. I get a little frustrated because I couldn't quite figure out what he's talking about. Subprime lumber crash, says North Dakota Alarm. I mean, I find it hard to believe that the speculators moved into the lumber market. It's possible, but there was a big issue in the spring of 2021, anyways. That was a COVID. You had just all of a sudden people stuck at home in the suburbs, and they're building a lot of stuff they've decided to do. They're not spending their money going on vacation. They're not spending their money going out to eat. And they start hiring people to build stuff in their backyard or to put an extension on their house, or like, like people were, go call a pool place. I've heard in some places it's like a 4-year wait for a pool because people are like, oh my God, what if I'm staying here for the rest of my life? I want a pool. I don't think that's people like, you could argue that is a function like that because people because we were giving out more money, or that people were able to afford a pool who couldn't before. But I have a feeling that's more just a redeployment of money. I mean, I would imagine many people also did well during COVID, but I find it hard to believe that it was like speculators speculating on the pool futures. And in the context of lumber, it's possible that after the initial rush from COVID, the implications for our supply lines and what was happening in Canada in terms of destruction of forests, which pushed pressure on that, all those things. I mean, it's possible that they will speculate on lumber, but I would imagine that's a secondary response to a rise in lumber. That's not where that would happen. Left is best. Would you have on Lee Camp to discuss censorship of anti-war journalists? Has he been censored? I don't. I mean,
Lee Camp. I don't know.
I mean, I think like I would. Is this an RT situation?
Yeah.
I mean, I broadly am not in favor of like everyone ganging up on RT, but it seems to me this was also like, I mean, this is you know, it's not like RT was an independent journalistic outfit. No. It was wholly financed by the Russian government. And I'm
not in favor of like the censorship of it or the expulsion of RT, but I mean, like, let's be real, why they hire certain people and what kind of information is coming out.
It's changed over the years.
It wasn't always this intense. Yeah.
Back in the early days, it was, there seemed to be sort of like, you know, like almost like what you get at like one of those restaurants in New York, where it's like we only hire models type of situation.
Wait, what?
Yeah, early on at RT, like I don't think they had any male hosts of their shows.
It's just like you could go work at RT or Abercrombie and Fitch.
There was some quality to it at that point. I mean, look, I guess the bottom line is like, I would not feel terribly uncomfortable if other countries said, hey, this U.S. sponsored Voice of America propaganda, like we're going to block that.
And I want to be clear too, like, as I mentioned, I rarely listen to CNN for as long as I did this weekend. That's U.S. propaganda in and of itself. I get that. But like, let's be real about, you know, RT's function or their purpose currently in America, or what they were trying to do. And, you know, I don't know enough about what Lee Camp does, but I haven't gotten great vibes.
I mean, I used to know him back when we would do like comedy with Laughing Liberally back like a decade ago. Yeah, there was a lot of that. Yeah, it goes way back. Dorsey's like, whoa, you just blew my mind. But I didn't, I mean, I think we've been pretty, let's see. Where is the sponsored by Raytheon or Big Pharma or Big Weapons? I don't know where is the sponsored by. But we are also not sponsored by Raytheon, Big Pharma, or Big Weapons. We did run a multivitamin ad today, but
multivitamins owned obviously by Big Pharma. It's a way to, I don't know.
Let's let's play clip number 4. This is so. Apparently, members of the, was it just the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, or was it the full Senate, had a Zoom call with Zelenskyy of Ukraine. The senators were asked, and this is a fairly obvious thing to ask, hey, please don't tweet out or use any social media during the course of the call, because as you may have heard, there are at least reports of multiple assassination attempts, squads that have been sent to find Zelenskyy. And there's a lot of reason to believe that Putin would want to assassinate Zelenskyy. So for security purposes, we'd rather not allow anyone to know that Zelenskyy is in one specific place at this one moment.
But the clout, Sam, the clout, the retweets and the likes. How could Marco Rubio resist the attention that he would get? Here is Rubio speaking to that very question. And I just want to say, before we even play this, kudos to him for not putting his Instagram account on his lapel pin. So here he is.
None at all. You're facing some criticism from fellow legislators for tweeting out a picture of President Zelenskyy during his Zoom with Congress yesterday. The ambassador asked members not to do that because it would endanger Zelenskyy. Why did you ignore that request?
Well, first of all, she said that well into the call. Second, there's no security risk in that at all. Perhaps she was under the impression that the Zoom call was a secret. It had been broadly reported, like multiple outlets, maybe even ABC had tweeted it was at 9:30. There were over 300 people on this call. The details of the call were emailed to a bunch of people. And it was a nondescript picture, unlike any of the other ones, just like the other ones you've seen on the air. So there's no security risk there.
You don't believe you put him at risk?
No.
The thing that I like about Rubio, he's been so down. He's been so low key about being a security expert, particularly in times of war, because of his service as a Green Beret.
Why is he could benefit from a hat? Why just huge ears. Why is he like trying to, he's been pretty naked and open about using the war in Ukraine for clout, even before this. I mean, he was like tweeting out before outlets had confirmed when the initial invasion happened. Like it was whatever, 9 p.m., something like that, Eastern. I was on Twitter. I saw Marco Rubio, like, the invasion has begun. And there was no confirmation from U.S. outlets. He seems to be like wanting to fashion himself as some sort of, I don't know, security expert person on the ground, use this to his advantage to some degree. And I'm not really sure why he would be doing it so clumsily, if that's the case.
Well, I would like to know, really, I mean, this is, why Stephanopoulos doesn't follow this up with, like, are you telling us that you have a better sense of the security requirements for Zelenskyy in a country that is being invaded and bombed? And, then I mean, like, based on what are you in position to determine the security risks associated with him zooming? Like, it's nondescript to you, idiot, because you've never been there. But the Ukrainians don't know if they have people who are associated with the Ukrainian government who are like, I know where that is. That's in this building in this city. I've been in that facility. There are 5 facilities where you could be doing Zoom from with that backdrop.
Right.
One of these 5. Like,
narrows it down.
Rubio has no idea. It's nondescript to him.
And Manchin was the other person that tweeted it out, right?
I don't think it was Manchin.
Who was
actually.
The second?
It was. I think it was it was another
Steve
Republican.
Daines.
Yeah.
Steve Daines. My apologies. Yeah. Okay. Manchin.
No, it was only Republicans who did it during the broadcast. They were allowed to do it afterwards.
Yeah.
But that's pretty impressive that this guy's up there saying that, and he's not. I mean,
Manchin only used it as an opportunity to like up coal production for himself, right? And saying Zelenskyy would have wanted this. So I got those two things confused.
But I mean, here's the thing: is that, and this is a greater theme that is, that I think we've talked about, and some people are skeptical because they think that Democrats are necessarily always doing things to fail. But this is an opportunity completely divorced from any of the issues that, people who make such assertions are interested in. How would it possibly, like, how bad do you have to be at politics for the Democrats not to be making Rubio a poster child for this? I mean, honestly, like, this is the type of stuff that would, if a Democrat had done this during a Republican administration, we would be hearing about this for at least as long as we heard about Dr. Seuss.
Or Benghazi.
Somewhere between Dr. Seuss and Benghazi.
Yeah.
We would be hearing about this.
Look, they're putting him at risk, et cetera, right? I mean,
yeah, it's like,
and I'm just curious, do you think that Rubio's eagerness to be at the forefront of this has to do with the fact that he fashions himself as like an anti-communist Cuban exile in Florida, and like, so then you can like turn that into some sort of anti-Russian thing? I'm not sure what his angle on this is.
I think that's a decent theory. I would imagine there is some of that associations by people that he's trying to appeal to in Florida. But I mean, I think the idea is that, he wants to sort of probably also, this is some Republicans trying to distance themselves from Trump in some ways. So I'm sure that's both of those things.
Yeah,
but nevertheless, this is, to do these type of things. I mean, that's the thing, is that when you say he's doing this for clout on Twitter, there's a lot of people who are like, come on, but that's exactly what he's doing it for. And it's not so much clout on Twitter. It's like, this is a branding exercise for him. And he doesn't care. I mean, And it's amazing. It's amazing the missed opportunity to just embarrass, to hurt the brand of a Republican in this instance. I mean, that's it. Democrats are just bad at doing this. Like how they have allowed conservatives to control what is being discussed in the media, which has been, I mean, it's the case. They have just allowed conservatives to control this thing. Part of it is they are much more concerted. There's much more outlets for them, particularly in the context of like radio, online. There's much more funding for these things. They have much more outside groups, but there doesn't even seem to be an attempt, and there doesn't even seem to be an awareness of the problem.
No.
It really is nuts. Here is Tucker Carlson, just another example of this. A Democratic Party, and I'm sorry, like, I'm not going to entertain the notion that Joe Biden secretly doesn't want his Supreme Court nominee to get on the bench. I imagine they do. So, and maybe they're very confident about the votes, but why wouldn't you engage in any type of media campaign? Well, what I would do is I would associate any criticism of Ketanji Brown Jackson with the worst elements of the Republican Party, of the conservative movement, as to why they would be against her. And Tucker Carlson is producing those examples, basically forging that hammer
on a nightly
basis on his program.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if I'm the administration, I'm going to say, you know, anybody who speaks out about the nominee, any senator, Lindsey Graham says the liberal left it's really disappointing to see Lindsey Graham on the same page as the racist comments of Tucker Carlson. Here is Tucker Carlson, who never called for the qualifications of the last three people appointed to the court, the last of whom had been a judge for about 15 minutes. Here is Tucker Carlson talking about someone who went to much better colleges and universities than he did. But more importantly, earned her way in. We'll talk more about Tucker's, the way he got into Trinity in a moment, but here is Tucker Carlson.
So is Ketanji Brown Jackson, a name that even Joe Biden has trouble pronouncing, one of the top legal minds in the entire country? We certainly hope so. Biden's right. Appointing her is one of his gravest constitutional duties. So it might be time for Joe Biden to let us know what Ketanji Brown Jackson's LSAT score was. What the hell did she do in the LSATs? Why wouldn't he tell us that? That would settle the question conclusively as to whether she's a once-in-a-generation legal talent, the next learned hand. It would seem like Americans in a democracy have a right to know that and much more before giving her a lifetime appointment, but we didn't hear that.
First off, your LSATs are what it takes to get into a law school.
Yes.
It's the function, like the functional equivalent, like the SATs or the ACTs to get into college. This is absurd. This isn't like
not even her college grades. They're not even. He's so lazy that he can't even copy and paste the like racist argument about, can we see Obama's grades? Remember that?
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. It is so incredibly transparent.
There, and I mean, I didn't go to law school, but my sister's in law school right now. Like, pretty sure it's kind of a joke people to even bring up your LSAT scores once you're already in the institution. It's like going to college and, as you say, like being like, I got a 33 in my ACTs. Suck on that. Nobody talks about that. It's irrelevant. It's your law school experience that matters. And then, of course, your professional experience.
I mean, Tucker Carlson is the most watched host on cable television, isn't he?
Yes.
Pretty close.
Yes.
And really, the American public deserves to know how he got his BA at Trinity. He said he was a horrible student. He had to have a special request from the dean at his prep school in Newport, Rhode Island. That's where all the mansions are. He went to St. something. I can't remember what the name of it was. It was the second school. He got kicked out of his Swiss boarding school, I think.
Mm.
But the dean of that private school put in a good word for him, which one could argue Tucker earned by dating and ultimately marrying his daughter, who was dating him at the time. And Tucker,
that's a lot of work
by all accounts,
to get a recommendation.
Was not a good student at Trinity. I think he said he got D's, which I think stands for the Diamond Club, which his parents were a member of. The Diamond Club at Trinity is the highest level of donation that they receive.
The bile is just bubbling up in my throat.
As Americans, we deserve to know the intelligence level of the people that we're getting our news from. And I think if you are the highest rated news person in cable television, you should be the first to reveal all of your grades and your transcript and any letters of recommendation that were sent into the schools that you went to.
Could Tucker lead by example in this instance?
Oh, and this is just, this is also, and then while you're there, why don't you tell us about the homophobia you engaged in?
Yeah, I remember that. The Jesse Helms Foundation. Look at that portrait of working class America. The tweed and the bow tie.
Both. Got to go with both. But that is just, again, a Democratic Party that was engaged in politics would be referring, would say with lament every time anyone brings up the nominee's name. Any Republican, it would be like, it's so sad to see you join the Tucker Carlson caucus in questioning the credentials of a decade-long jurist. She's been on the court on, she was a trial judge and then appellate court for a year or two for over a decade. And one which the Senate already approved. But
yeah, and let's not let the moment at the start where he makes a racist quip about her name go unnoticed as well.
Right, of course.
Yeah. It's actually not that hard to pronounce.
No. I get it right. Calling from a 518 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
Yeah, it is.
Hey, Sam, this is Luke. I'm from Oneonta, New York.
Luke from Oneonta, New York. Is that where the Baseball Hall of Fame is? Oh, that's Cooperstown.
That's Cooperstown. A couple miles north.
It's close, right?
Yeah. Close, not far.
Yeah,
not far.
Oneonta is, I know some people up there.
Yeah. So first
that's
off,
what it is. I performed at that college. There's a college there, right?
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two. SUNY Oneonta and Hartwick.
Who did I go up there with? I feel like it was, I don't know. I can't remember now. But we were thinking about going over to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Maybe we did.
I think it's close.
Yeah.
It is. It's about 20 minutes north.
Nice.
I don't know if it was Marin or Louis C.K. This was like a long time ago.
Wow.
I had totally forgotten about that.
That's a big name drop.
I'm not sure. I mean, I was probably just opening or traveling for them. I can't remember who it was. Okay, go ahead.
So two quick things. One is just a thank you to you guys. I ran for office for city council a couple of years ago and managed to win in a writing campaign.
Oh, wow.
And Emma and you and Young Turks and everyone in this kind of orbit, it really inspired me just to kind of really push for progressive values at the ground level. And I've been at the Oneonta City Hall for about 2 years now. So thank you.
Wow. That's
for your inspiration for that.
That's great to hear.
Thank you very much. A second thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, have either of you, I've noticed a lot online, and I know online isn't necessarily real, but the attack on the Azov Battalion as being neo-Nazi, which it is, but I don't often hear talks about the Wagner Group. Have either of you heard of it?
Yes, I have, but
No, I have not. What is the Wagner Group?
It's a PMC. It's a private military company that was founded and is, I believe, led by a Dmitry Utkin, who is a infamous neo-Nazi in Russia. They were really heavily involved in the siege of Aleppo.
I was about to say, I heard this in the context of Syria, right?
Yes, and there's belief now that, and you have to take it with a grain of salt with information coming out in war, but they potentially were the group behind at least one or two of the attempts behind Zelensky's assassination, or at least laying the groundwork for the invasion. But interestingly enough, I haven't heard a lot from your good friend Jackson Hinkle there talking about the neo-Nazis in the Russian military service. If you look this guy's picture up on Wikipedia, he's got the golden eagle and the swastika on his chest, which is pretty blatant. So not to excuse the Azov Battalion or the very many neo-Nazis in the United States, but just to put it out there, I really haven't, and it's concerned me. It seems like a lot of people are forgiving Russia's imperialism and forgiving a lot of the nationalism and Russian really super far right, ultra national.
I think you're spot on. Go on, Sam.
Well, no, I mean, people are doing that, but I think the number of people are doing that are quite limited. I have to tell you. I mean, I think that I think it's wrong, and it undercuts, I think their anti-imperialism. We were just talking about this before, the idea that people would say, all right, granted, the United States should not have invaded and gone to war with Vietnam, but they did genuinely believe in the domino theory. And there were people who genuinely believed that the United States security was at risk in Vietnam. Now, you could say, well, wait, close proximity. Well, okay. I mean, Americans legitimately believe that Cuba, by having a strong economy, could threaten them in some fashion. Or, I mean, honestly, we would never accept that kind of talk.
No, absolutely not.
This that represented no immediate, direct, or even long-term threat to the national security in terms of war. I mean, I suppose there's an argument that Putin feels well, if we lose control of the breadbasket of Russia, that we will be less of an even more diminished superpower. But I'm sorry, that's not a justification for invasion. And I'm someone who believes that we should have never expanded NATO. Yes. And someone who hosted and, largely agrees with, at least months ago anyways, the value of questioning whether we need a NATO at all. That, of course, is, an impossible thing to argue at this point, at this juncture with what we're seeing. But I certainly still believe that it was a mistake for us to expand NATO just because we didn't need to. It's one, it didn't make sense in that regard from my perspective when we did it. But
let me just add really quickly too, because I think your point is a necessary one. And I said this a little bit to start off the show, but it is important that in the chaos and fear of the war in Ukraine, that the Azov battalion is marginalized. That is something that is necessary, I believe. But at the same time, the over focus on it, to your point, caller, is meant to, it's truly just serving Russian propaganda and the trying to ascribe some sort of morality to an imperialist enterprise and something that's really dangerous and killing people right now, where there is none to be found. And so the existence of neo-Nazis in Ukraine does nothing to fundamentally change or alter the immorality of this war on Russia's side. And so it's incumbent upon us as people in the media, and I think Sam's right that these voices are small but they're loud, to emphasize the right things and not distort what is happening on the ground there. So
appreciate the call.
Yeah, thanks guys. Take care.
We should have asked this guy. Maybe we don't want to put him on the spot, but He's a New York politician.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that the late governor, well, he's not passed away, the disgraced, former governor of New York State, Andrew Cuomo, who disgraced for many reasons, administration just riddled with scandal regarding the reporting of deaths during COVID, the using of staff to write, help him out with a book that he was privately profiting from. Also, all of the horrible things he did politically in terms of basically preventing Democratic voters who thought they had elected a majority of Democrats in the New York Senate. He midwifed a caucus that would basically caucus with Republicans so that he'd never had to sign any legislation that came from a Democratic majority.
Right. Any legislation that might, I don't know, help end some of the things that he talks about need to be canceled in this video.
And his Me Too stuff was not ultimately actionable legally. I think it was we just have to take the words of many women who came out and expressed discomfort, including a state trooper, with his sexual harassment. But sometimes it's tough to give up the ghost. Andrew Cuomo is back. He's raised a bunch of money, probably mostly from Ken Langone, although I'm not sure about that. And folks, he's back.
He released this video and it's very cinematic. It fades in.
Round 2. Let's watch this.
So yes, this is a time for impatience, but constructive impatience. If you want to cancel something, cancel federal gridlock, cancel the incompetence, cancel the infighting, cancel crime, cancel homelessness, cancel education inequality, cancel poverty, cancel racism. Be outraged, but be outraged at what really matters, and what really matters is what matters to you.
Don't cancel me. Is there more? Can we watch more?
That's really it. And I'm curious where
that's all his video. This is part of his like hundreds of thousands of dollars of ad campaign to bring him back.
Where was he speaking? Because it probably was at some sort of private speaking engagement, and he thought, man, this is what I want to get out there to the public. I'm going to clip this.
It was at a church in Crown Heights.
Oh.
Like an ally of his.
Okay, right.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to give him a platform right now except all of the allies he's accrued here in New York? But
well, the interesting thing is it's going to be a test is that how hated he was, because he ruled, he was the most vindictive person one could imagine, and ruled like he was. And
yeah.
Cancel other things besides me. Do we have another video? Do we have another one?
Well, how about cancel poverty? Something that might have helped with that is like Medicaid expansion.
Well, Medicaid contraction certainly didn't help. The closing of a bunch of public hospitals didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
The rollback on corporate taxes didn't help. I mean, this guy was governor for how many years? 10 years?
Oh, yeah.
Was it 10 years or was it 8 years? 10 years, right? Man, it's too bad you hadn't. It's too bad you promoted that IDC.
I know.
There could be no legislation to deal with canceling a bunch of the stuff about that stuff. Cancel crime. We should just cancel crime.
I mean, honestly, that's how cancel culture works.
Give me your money. You're canceled.
Right. Then we've finally achieved world peace. I'd like to cancel war.
Oh man, we should have canceled war. Spent so much time canceling. I mean, the value to New Yorkers in canceling Andrew Cuomo, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue.
Right. Honestly, all the things he talks about in terms of cancellation, right? Cancel federal gridlock, cancel incompetence, infighting, crime, homelessness, education inequality, poverty, racism. Canceling Cuomo was a necessary step in order to cancel those things.
How do we cancel federal gridlock? That's weird.
Yeah, that's the one thing that canceling Cuomo did not take us a step forward towards. So you can't get them all.
In all honesty, I think
one swift cancellation.
The cherry on top here, and I don't want to be too glib about it, because if somehow he does make some type of comeback, it would be terrifying. But it's very hard to believe at this point that he could mount any type of serious campaign, because who would be on the ground? Like, how much money would you have to have at this point if you're Andrew Cuomo to expend the resources to have people actually politicking for you? I mean, this is a guy who is hated amongst, universally. Not even from an ideological perspective.
No, because he's a bully.
He's just such an ass. And he had all the connections, and all those connections are gone.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, like, we didn't even highlight this, but a few weeks ago, there was a profile of Tish James in New York Magazine. And she eventually led this sexual harassment investigation into him. He apparently took her out on a small boat.
Oh, yeah.
And then said, quote, he said that he expects loyalty from me. Spokesperson from Cuomo denies this. They both caught fish and they returned to shore, James recalled. And Cuomo said his was bigger, even though that was not the case. So he basically took Tish James out to threaten her with some sort of Fredo-esque killing.
That's how Fredo
I'm sorry
was
for
gone.
saying a slur.
No, but literally in the movie, that is how Fredo is taken out.
But that's the point, is he fashions himself as some sort of mobster / old school politician. And oh wait, here we go. We got more clips from this.
Yeah. Wait. Can I see what the tweet says? Can you just go back for 1 second? I am blessed. I have many options in life, and I am open to all. But on the question if I am at peace, no, I'm not. But I don't want to be at peace. And by the way, I don't think you should be at peace either. In other words, this is his, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention.
Tell it to your therapist.
To me.
Yeah, say I one more time.
So I am blessed, my friends. I have many options in life, and I'm open to all of them. But on the question if I am at peace, no, I am not at peace.
Pause it for 1 second.
No one's asking
by the
that.
way,
Who asked the question of, is Andrew Cuomo at peace? I mean, I imagine people have said, man, I hope that guy's not at peace. But I don't really care enough to actually ask. That I can imagine people saying.
I'm curious about his psychological state, honestly. That's the only thing that I can think about.
Well, people could have said, man, that guy, he's a piece of shit. But I don't think anybody's been asking if he's at peace. I also just can't believe that he, spoiler alert, dude, why are you putting the whole quote up if that's what the clip is? But go ahead.
I don't want to be at peace either.
Okay.
And by the byway, I don't think you should be at peace either. We have too much work to do to be at peace.
Hold on for a second. Pause it. Go back. I'll go back on this. And I want to see, go back to the tweet now. Go back to the tweet. I want to see if he put by the byway. And by the way is what he put in the quote. But when he actually said it, he said by the byway. Yeah, I mean, that's classic Cuomo.
By the Mario Cuomo
Rewriting
highway.
history. Here we go. Let's do it again. Play it.
All of them. But on the question if I am at peace.
We don't have that question.
No, I am not at peace.
Well, good then.
But by the way,
that's
I don't want to be at peace either.
Okay.
And by the byway, I don't think you should be at peace either. We have too much work to do to be at peace. We can be at peace when they put us in the box and they close the top. We can rest in peace. But right now we have to rise up, brothers and sisters.
Oh, geez.
Right now we have to fight the good fight because the struggle continues. We have to stand up for progressive politics and a government that does what it says it would do and makes a real difference. We have to stand up against the radical right and their demagogues. We have to stand up and say, we don't judge by the color of skin in this nation. We judge by the content of character. We have to stand up and say, I am my brother's keeper.
Who's doing the
And
music?
I'm proud of it. And I believe in Matthew 25. And let's say the greatest success
So we're
is
judging
the
by the
success that is shared, and the greatest feast is the feast with the most number of people at the table. Let's make some trouble. Let's make some good trouble, and let's make this state the greatest state of the nation. Thank you, and God bless you.
Shoot that. They mean to do the crowd like, oh,
Very sparsely attended.
people at this place.
Woo-wee.
And Cuomo on the comeback. Don't call it a comeback. Call it just an expenditure for media brokers who had his ear.
Yeah, we're not supposed to judge people on the color of their skin. Totally get that. We're supposed to judge them on the content of their character. I have certainly judged Cuomo on the content of his character.
Indeed. All right, let's take one more call. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 509's got in early today.
Hey, Sam. Hello?
Ronald Reagan.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Hey, I've been hearing a lot about Seder.
Okay.
But have you heard of Tehesseh?
Yeah, I've heard of Tehesseh. Yeah.
And what do you think? Tehesseh.
You mean Thomas? Hello? Crowder?
Well, I call it Tehesseh, and lately, I've been finding it's pretty great.
Glad to hear that.
How about you?
Are you indulging right now?
I was going to say, your clients aware that that's the way you're spending this morning?
Well, no, but I just wanted to see where you stand on when you were wandering around Disneyland. Was there any Tehesseh going on?
No, there was not.
Just Seder.
There was, well, Seder is legal to travel with. I don't know what the laws in Florida are. And I did progressively over the course of the week begin to drink more and earlier. And I'm not going to deny that. This will all be part of my Disney wrap up. So I'm not going to.
You've been teasing that for a while.
Oh yeah, I know. I got to get my stuff together. It's probably going to take another week.
Hey, I've been doing a little citizen journalism, Michael Tracy style, and
so do you have a karaoke machine?
I do, and I'm working on putting together a little package, and I was wondering if maybe we could debut it at one of your live shows.
I would consider that.
There was some undercover work, and I think your audience is going to find the work quite explosive.
Well, I don't want to be accused of censoring or shadow banning anybody or stifling the truth, so I will consider it.
Okay.
I'm not going to make any
I'll get this together
commitment right now, but why don't you get it together and we'll see.
Okay. Just a little teaser for you and the audience.
Great. Well, we are all on the edge of our seats.
All right. Bye.
Bye. There you go, folks. That could conceivably be on the Brooklyn Live show.
Ooh.
It's possible. I'm not going to say it will be. I'm not going to say it won't be. At this time, I'll probably hope that people forget. So we'll see. Play one more clip here. Should we do Mike Lindell or should we do Campus Duffy?
I think Mike.
Mike Lindell. Let's go with the low-hanging fruit at
This
the end.
guy's wow, this guy, I gotta say, what a journey Mike Lindell has taken. Incidentally, promo code RSBN.
No, that's just that's the name of the network. RSBN.
Yeah.
No, there's the promo code. I see it now.
The promo code. Yeah, of course, up to 66% off. Weird 666 is the mark of the devil. I'm not sure what he's trying to tell us. This guy's story, have we done a biopic of him yet? Has that happened? Because it's got to.
Who would play him?
Oh, boy. That would be quite a role.
He kind of looks like Tom Selleck.
Yeah, Tom Selleck is a little bit, I think, past the time where he could do this.
Right. Well, I mean.
But here is Mike Lindell. He is in Arizona promoting the Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake. And he is going to be launching a lawsuit against all the machines that are used in voting. And it's an interesting legal theory, but go ahead.
Here, I'm going to tell you right now, I've been working on it 5 months, and we're doing a class action. Actually, I'm announcing it here. I announced it on my program. Y'all watch Frank's speech.
Pause 1 second. First off, this guy's been has dropped major revelations multiple times over the past year and a half, right? Like that is going to change everything. He's been working for 5 months with lawyers to announce a major class action against, are you ready for this, folks? And incidentally, he throws in a plug for his network, which he's also, but here it is.
Class action that's like Santa Claus, right? Except because it's
class action. Class action.
It's not real.
It's
not real.
All of my attorneys are German. That's the way that he does that. Go ahead.
Here, I'm going to tell you right now, I've been working on it 5 months. And we're doing a class action. Actually, I'm announcing it here. I announced it on my program. Y'all watch frankspeech.com. Keep watching. But it's a class action lawsuit against all machines and that they're defective devices, okay? I have lawyers worked on this for 5 months. We're getting county commissioners, county clerks. They're all the plaintiffs, and we've already got about 300 on board, and we're going to get rid of these machines once and for all for any election in history.
Well, you're not going to be able to get rid of the voting machines in history. You're going to have to work on going forward.
Maybe with
the future is
maybe
really,
with a good machine, you can go back in time.
It is unclear like what he's talking about. I think he's talking about voting machines, but I don't know if he's talking about like.
No, he's talking about all machines because maybe this is him. Bradley, can you just put up this link I sent you? I mean, why stop there, right? I have like in my building, the dryers are never working. I might join in on this class action lawsuit on the washer dryer situation. Maybe this is him.
Yeah, makers of repair device for ice cream machines sue McDonald's in $900 million lawsuit.
You should get in on this because, everybody, when you try to get ice cream at McDonald's, it's always the machine's not working. No matter which McDonald's you go to, machine's never working. This is him. This has got to be him.
He's got to, but I don't even think 5 months. I know the lawyers have been working on this and they've gotten 300 plaintiffs, but they don't have the same machines, do they? Or maybe they do. Like, I'm trying to take it as seriously as possible. He's saying like these county clerks are going to sue the machines. I don't really think he's suing the machines themselves. He's probably suing the makers of the machines for some problem that is in the machines. I am in favor of as many class action suits as possible. And I find it hard to imagine that this suit is ever going to go anywhere. But it'll be interesting to see, assuming he's not talking about all the machines.
Well, I hope he sues all machines. He's suing modernity.
I feel like he's like 15 minutes away from that.
He seems very jittery.
There's something going on that I feel like is impacting his behavior. Folks, that is it for our phone portion of the show. I'm going to read some IMs. We went a little long in the interview today. I apologize for that, although I think it was very much worth it.
It was great.
Yeah, I found it very interesting and informative and was very happy with it. Here is Juicy on the IM. Starts out as an innocent rock climbing birthday party. Next thing you know, Saul will be eating top ramen inside of a van that is now his home outside of Moab, Utah, with his dirtbag climber friends.
Wow, so people don't like rock climbers, huh?
Illuminati kids, I want to apologize to Bradley for my IM impugning him for the sound quality on Friday. I only sent it as a way to use a joke to let people know about David Ree's music. Educating through comedy, if you will. Please do not cancel me. Don't want to be forced to start IMing into Tucker Carlson's show.
You're already been canceled. Too late.
Majority Report wardrobe coordinator of Congress puts forth legislation to ban Russian oil imports. Could they tack on any climate renewable energy provisions from BBB and make Republicans vote on it? Maybe. But then you'd get Joe Manchin out there going like, come on, man, that's not what this is about. Kid tested Politburo approved. I think you all need to admit that Tushy Bidet was developed by Lockheed Martin. Sam Elliott might be able to play Lindell if he gains some weight. Actually, Stephen Root would be perfect as Lindell. Oh, that is actually true. Mojamine, the Twin Cities has been under surveillance since the riots, just like every other major city in the U.S., to push the fascist agenda of the Reagan youth. Yeah, there's a story by, like I say, the headline that today by the MIT. What is the name of that outfit, the journalist outfit that they have? It's really actually quite good. Interviewed them a couple of times on a couple of different shows on the Peacock show, the old Peacock show. And we'll cover that story this week. Talia from Tampa. Tucker's point is to try and suss out whether KBJ is a beneficiary of affirmative action. And then try to say, do we want this person deciding if affirmative action is legal? It's BS, of course. Also, please look into the Cawthorn disqualification case and the idiotic ruling from the federal judge. Matthew from Minneapolis, since he defines everything as a declaration of war and appears to be constantly signaling, Russia is mirroring the Western neoliberal order and method. Not sure I follow. Dave, have you seen the clip of Irish MP Richard Boyd Barrett calling out the hypocrisy of reactions to Ukraine relative to the reactions to Palestine? It's pretty powerful. I have not seen that, but I did hear about it. I want to check that out. Ray, Bradley is doing a great job with Matt on vacation. The only thing missing from the occasional background cackle from Matt when something funny happens. Work on that, Bradley.
Bradley's more of like a quieter laugher, I would say, right? But Bradley's laughs a good amount. He's a chortler, yes.
Let's see. 10 long gnomes. Have you thoughts on the rumor that the volunteer battalion heading to Ukraine will have some former special op members to give some plausible deniability while letting NATO forces help? I mean, I would imagine that there could be mercenaries being sent who are being paid, that there could be former service people who are just like want to get back into war. Mm-hmm. Is it conceivable that some special operations have some, I just don't, I think like, I think it would be unlikely, but it's not, listen, if you really want to do that, the way you would do it would be like, you'd get somebody with a lot of moneyed interests to pay mercenaries, former special ops people to go in. I find it hard to, but and who knows in that world? Is it conceivable? It seems conceivable to me, but I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, it's almost like, what difference does it make? These guys in and out of, of mercenary, they have the same training. It's not like there's these major edicts. To a large extent, maybe there's saboteurs going in. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Daredevil. In my opinion, the best kind of apple is the pineapple. I planted some pine trees to grow some, but they must be the wrong kind. The pine cones taste awful. Haha. dad joke. Vinny Holiday. Hey, Sam, can you give a quick rundown of how the war with Ukraine has caused gas prices to shoot up? We haven't stopped buying Russian oil yet. Or are there other causes? Well, one, I would imagine it's basically futures. People are anticipating supply shortages because of shipping lanes being cut there, because of people boycotting oil or people not buying oil. I would imagine it's just the futures that we're dealing with.
That and MBS is not playing ball in terms of upping oil production from Saudi Arabia thus far.
Donald Trump made a deal at the beginning of COVID with OPEC where they would cut production. And my understanding is that deal, it was a 2-year long deal. And my understanding is that is ending soon. So it's going to be interesting to see how much ass kissing the Biden administration will have to do.
Well, Axios is reporting that that's in the works. So
yep.
Good that we have not started our green transition sooner.
That's this is the bottom line. And also to be clear, there is no amount of U.S. production of oil that is going to impact this. Unless we nationalize all of the refining, all of the oil exploration and drilling that takes place in this country, and it becomes a national asset, and we do not put it on the international market. And that would be the way that we would do this. Now, if people are suggesting nationalizing all of these oil companies' assets, I am open to discussing that. For a short-term solution to the price of gas, we will begin to phase it out since they have no interest anymore in U.S. policy because they no longer exist. So let's talk about that. Let's get serious about this. If this is a national security issue, we need the national government to take over these enterprises for national security purposes. So let's do this. Let's do it. James Darwin. Sam, thanks for the interview with KSJV. Don't know if your minions mentioned it, but I played a key role in securing that interview for you. Kim's a colleague here at Penn. My finder's fee is a drink on you at the Bell House in Brooklyn show. I did not know that, but sure.
If this is Andrew, thank you.
Oh, really?
Sam's greased up calves. It's more of an ET thing than a Mary Poppins thing, Emma. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Sam, if a Wall Street firm can find a commodity to profit on speculation from, they'll find it. It could easily be lumber. It's conceivable, but I find it really hard to believe. Now, it's possible that that happened after the initial, like it became clear that there was going to be a shift and people went in and started buying lumber futures, I guess. But there's some real world things that are impacting it. I don't think it's that there was that it was the Fed which was driving the lumber prices. I don't think. Bar Bill. Hey, MR, Bill Barr was on 60 Minutes last night hawking his new book. He's the perfect example of a Republican fence sitting on Trump. Defended himself by being against a Trump hatchet man by claiming he didn't like Trump's tweets. Jonathan Armstead. Because of a change in computer recently, I've had to listen to the show on YouTube while I work and leave my TV on MSNBC on mute in the background. David Frum and Simone Sanders are on Cuck Todd right now talking about gas prices in Ukraine. I can't hear them, but based on their animated body language, this conflict is really hurting shameless grifters. All right, 3 more of these. Los Tacos. People traditionally focus on demand pull inflation, that is price increases due to an increase in demand, sometimes due to an increase in monetary supply. But they very frequently forget about the very important cost push inflation, prices going up because costs of raw materials go up and overall supply goes down. You know, like the kind of thing that happens when you have supply chain problems with a pandemic. Exactly. Tom Tom Club. It's funny that both brothers are the Fredo. And the final IM of the day. Aaron is not cool. There was an entire Netflix doc that find a serial killer based on a room webcam. Don't F with cats.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what that has in why that's relevant to this.
It's not relevant to anything.
Okay, but that's a good, crazy but disturbing documentary. This like serial killer was posting graphic videos of them killing cats, and then in the end posted a killing of a person, and they were like, all these people who were cat advocates, pet advocates, were able to do some detective work and eventually figured him out.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's nuts.
On that note, Bradley, Dorsey, Emma, great job today. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I get somewhere I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how